Well, thank you very much. It's nice to be here. So I will not be talking about, let me see how we pass them. So I will not be talking about frailty. Many has been said about it. I will not be talking about sarcopenia because many has been said about it and will be said. It's really beyond the scope. But one idea was clear is that we have an idea that frailty and sarcopenia are very related and very associated. And even people are saying that all frail people, by definition, are sarcopenic. So that's why we decided to do this analysis. Because what we see in the Frailty Day Clinic is that not all frail people are sarcopenic, and this analysis will try to show it. But also, we wanted to see if finally the SPRINT criteria, the new FNIH criteria, if they are more or less associated as a classical criteria. That means that are we really developing sarcopenia and frailty? Are we going forwards? Are we going backwards with these new definitions? And if with SPRINT criteria, we can identify more easily sarcopenia in frail people. I've got many slides, so I will go fastly over the slides. I'll be happy to talk with you later on. They are really straightforward. You can imagine these are associations, so it's a cross-section analysis. So I won't be talking about methodology. Just to talk about the Toulouse Frailty Day Hospital, I will talk about what we did, what sarcopenia definitions we took. The sarcopenia, we analyzed it as a continuous variable. Then we categorized as cut points. And finally, we looked for associations in between sarcopenia and frailty. So the Frailty Day Clinic is Frailty Day Clinic set up in Toulouse. People are coming to see us once they have been screened by the GP with the Gerontopol frailty screening tool. As you can see, it's a really straightforward screening tool. This tool can be used everywhere we want. We don't even need the patient before us. We just need to remember how he is to answer these questions. If the GP thinks he's frail, he sends him to the Frailty Day Clinic, where they will have more or less in between 5-6 hours of analysis of questionnaires. And finally, the person goes back with a personalized preventive plan to prevent disability. So this is the main characteristics of the Frailty Day Hospital, where you can see that we are in real life. So it's a clinical database where we have older people, 83 years, mainly women, living alone 40%, ADLs that were autonomous, many mental state examination for cognition over 24 as a mean. So we mean that we are having really autonomous community dwelling older people. When we look at frailty and SPPB, we see that most of the people are frail and pre-frail. And when we look at SPPBs, we can see that most of the people are in between the 7 and 9 cut points, the 10, 12 cut points. So we've got a good population of community dwelling, autonomous, without cognitive decline, frail people. When we look, so what we did with, in some of them, we will not be able, because we are in clinical settings, we will not be able to do a DEX assessment to all the people coming to the frailty clinic. We just did it in a subsample of 300 patients, where the characteristics, without really going over them, but you can see that these characteristics are exactly the same as the frailty population. So these 300 people are comparable with all the other population coming to the frailty clinic. The sarcopenia definitions we used, as you can see, we used the Baumgartner, without going into detail, everybody knows about him. We used the Baumgartner definition, Delmonico's definition, Newman's, Harris. This is, I don't know if Tamara Harris published this definition. It's the appendicular lean mass divided by appendicular fat mass. And she found some nice cut points in the NHANES. So I don't know if there's a paper out there, but this was one of the definitions Tamara proposed some years ago when we talked together in a GerontoNet meeting in Paris. There's a Toulouse exploratory definition using the appendicular lean mass divided by total fat mass. We use the 20th percentile. I will talk later on why we have tried to do this approach of sarcopenia. There's the international working groups where we use Baumgartner's with a low gauge speed, or it can be hand grip. I just picked up low gauge speed over here. And the new FNIH definitions. And finally, the SPRINT consortium definition with physical frail to be physical frail and with SPPBs in between 3 and 9, and a sarcopenic gender-specific cut points for the FNIH definitions, appendicular lean mass, standardized by BMI, and just solely the appendicular lean mass. So these are the first analysis of continuous variables. This analysis, the first one, is just to show how it works, because this is a regression in between gauge speed on the left-hand side, SPPB, right-hand side, so Freed. As you know, there are collinear because there's gauge speed and SPPB and in Freed. So just a graph to show you that looking at SPPBs muscle mass and performance should go up when you go up in the score, because at 12 SPP, you're good performance. But with the freed, it's going the other way around. When you are at 5, the highest score in freed is that you're most frail, so it goes down. So really, we should have some nice correlation coefficient going up for the SPPB and going down for the freed if we think that these parameters are well associated together. So this is the Baumgartner's definition and the Delmonico definition. We used appendicular lean mass divided by squared height. There were cut points, specific cut points for the Baumgartner, gender-specific cut points for the lowest 20% for Delmonico. But when you look at the two graphs, left-hand side for men, women, and right-hand side for SPPB and right-hand side for freed, you can see that we've got nearly flat associations with very low coefficient of correlation. And even it seems that for the freed criteria, that the appendicular lean mass standardized by height squared goes up, so it seems that the frail people have higher index than non-frail people. Looking with Neumann's, that's just to show the residuals. We will not graph the residuals because it would be another way of looking at it. I will talk about Neumann later on. When we look at the appendicular lean mass, the proportion by Harris divided by appendicular fat mass, we have also some cut points from the NHANES. But looking at the continuous variable, we can see it goes, for men, it goes up. In the SPPB, for the men also it goes nicely down with a nice R for the freed criteria. But when we look at women, it seems to be flat. So the appendicular lean mass divided by appendicular fat mass seems to, so there's some differences in between gender differences. Looking at the FNIH, so appendicular lean mass, I've also said the cut points, but once more I'm looking at the continuous variable. So it's going slightly up for men and women for the SPPB. It's going down for the freed criteria, but as you can see, we don't have steep gradients, so with little r's. So as we see later on, the analysis will probably have the same, more or less the same results. And this is finally the appendicular lean mass standardized by BMI. And here we see, at least in between all the graphics, that it seems to be the best, at least for SPPBs in our population, the frail population for the Frail Today Clinic. And we look at SPPBs on the left-hand side, freed criteria right-hand side. They go up for women and men for the SPPB, and it's going down for men and women for the freed criteria. Why did we do the Toulouse appendicular lean mass divided by total fat mass? Because in the EPIDO study, it's a French study for osteoporosis, but we had 7,000 DEXAs done at baseline. We can see a nice correlation in between BMI and fat mass, is the graphic on the top-hand side. So we decided why not to include this definition to see if it works for identifying older people, frail older people, to identify sarcopenia and to find this association. So finally, we're looking at SPPB. These are the 5 analyses. In the middle is the SPPB, is the appendicular lean mass standardized by BMI, because I think it was looking at the R's and looking at the gradient, it seems the best marker, the best regression in between SPPB and measure of sarcopenia. Looking at the freed, exactly the same. In the middle, you'll have the appendicular lean mass standardized by BMI as the best marker to associate freed with some kind of muscular parameter. Prevalence of sarcopenia. This is an overall prevalence published some years ago for women and men. We can see an overall prevalence of between 10 and 20%, depending on the course, depending on the American or European course. The orange one was Chinese cohort. Looking at our data, looking at the prevalence, the global prevalence, and the sarcopenia prevalence, we can see we've got ranges. Normal, it's always easy to say, but normally when we do the 20%, lowest 20%, we always have a sarcopenia prevalence of 20%. So this is really artificial. It's a way of constructing the variable. But we can see that the sarcopenia for the sprint, the prevalence goes up nearly to 40%. So and the Aleph measurement is under 8%, is around 8%. So we've got a prevalence of sarcopenia in between 8 and 40%, depending on the measure we are using. So what did we do to look if sarcopenia is associated with frailty? We used the 5 original frailty criteria. Only the Minnesota Leisure Time Activity Questionnaire is very difficult to administer in the everyday clinical activity. We changed it for the Chianti questionnaire, and we identified with the Chianti questionnaire sedentary people. Frailty was characterized as frail against pre-frail and frail. A statistical approach was an association, so we had a cross-sectional with logistic regression models. We used as confounders agender, MMSE, ADL, MNA, and gait speed, SPPB, and BMI were not included in the models because it could be some, we didn't search for interaction, but it's normal that looking at free that we cannot include SPPB or gait speed and BMI because they are included already in the formula. So not going really into detail, this is the bivariate analysis, main characteristic by frailty status. So when you're frail and when you're pre-frail, you look at all the parameters as well. We've got a statistical association in between the main parameters. So there's differences in between pre-frail and being frail and being and robust in this population. When we look finally at the logistic regression analysis, we can see that the first column is crude odds ratio with no adjustment. Finally, the last column is the adjusted odds ratio, 95% confidence interval. And what we see in this as the results is that the association once of the appendicular lean mass divided by appendicular fat mass, we have an associated of 15, odds ratio of 15, but you can see we can have some problems. There was a little percentage, so we've got some problems with power as the confidence interval goes in between 2 and 90. And what we saw analyzing these data is that finally the most efficient or the most strong associations in between frailty, being frail, and sarcopenia was found with the new sprint definition, having SPPBs in between 3 and 9, or using appendicular lean mass divided by BMI, or appendicular lean mass with the FNAH cut points. Afterwards, we had also the appendicular lean mass divided by BMI, so also was associated nearly threefold increase for the frail people of being sarcopenic. So we see that finally, when we add fat mass to the formula, and that's been seen many times in many analyses, just the Baumgartner, the Monicus, when we look at fat mass standardized by height squared, there are not many associations seen with other parameters like function or cognition. There are many papers out there also on cognition, but we really see that we need to mix fat mass in between the formula and the construction of the formula. So really fat mass is as important as muscle mass when we look at sarcopenia. So finally, at the conclusions, for the sarcopenia definitions as a continuous variable, we think, at least the analysis show, that appendicular lean mass divided by body mass index seems to be better correlated with SPPB and Fried. For the sarcopenia definitions as a categorized variable, the prevalence of sarcopenia in between 10 and 38%. And when we look at frail people, it's more or less the same. That's not a single patient. Just looked at all the sarcopenia definitions. There was not a single patient that had all the sarcopenia definitions at the same time. The multivariate analysis showed that the highest odds were for the sprint definition and the target population in between frail older adults, but the odds were as high as 3. So really, we cannot state that all frail people are sarcopenic. The odds are high, but we need to. But the frail people could be a good target population to look finally also at the sarcopenic parameter, because in between these frail people, we will find these sarcopenic people. And as you know, well, it's a cross-sectional association with frailty. Frailty is not an outcome. So I really cannot say from these analyses nothing else about the sarcopenia parameters if they really are useful to use them in our frailty clinic as a parameter to be taken into account to do predictions about loss of autonomy. There's one paper I found, and you can correct me if you have some other information. I found one paper significantly looking at the Fried criteria and sarcopenia. It's published 1 year ago. It's from the German team. They were mainly robust and pre-frail people. They were not frail people, and they had some kind of prevalences, more or less the same for the pre-people as we had. So the sample size was also an issue for the appendicular lean mass and appendicular fat mass from the Harris definition. So as a conclusion, these analyses of the day hospital show that in between the frailty people coming to the frailty clinic, and they are identified by GPs as being frail and needing an intervention in our frailty clinic, we can really say that the new sprint criteria, the appendicular lean mass divided by BMI, or the appendicular lean mass with the FNAH cut points, and SPPB between 3 and 9, could be a good criteria to identify these people, and could be a good criteria. So this frailty clinic to identify people going to the SPRINT study. And that was all that I needed to say to you. Thank you very much.